My name is Yinka Oyekan. I'm the senior minister at the Gate in Reading, and currently, uh, because of all my colleagues, the current president of the Baptist Union of Great Britain. A real privilege and honor, honored position to find myself in. My understanding of justice cannot be really articulated without making clear that I believe that a God who is a God of justice holds mercy alongside justice. So God doesn't give us what we deserve, although God is a God of justice, and and justice means doing right by everybody, and doing right by those, whether they're widows or orphans or aliens or strangers, doing what's right by them. Alongside that goes, though, in my own mind, this God of justice who doesn't just give us what we deserve, which we see in Christ Jesus, who died on the cross whilst we were yet sinners. We see a God who demands justice, nevertheless finding ways and solutions that brings us back into fellowship with him, brings us back into relationship with him. In other words, for me, justice always goes hand in hand with mercy. And so when I think about justice, about what's right and what the right thing to do is, and when I get upset about people who don't do the right thing, I always think about the mercy of God alongside that God finds a way to help us find individually a way back to him. And so I often try to think about, what can I do to help move the conversation on? How can I apply mercy rather than throw grenades into what already in some cases is an inflamed situation? So for me, justice is about doing what's right by people, treating them in the right way. It's about what's equitable and fair. If you think about mission, at the heart of mission is the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's whatever tools we use, whatever means by which we serve people who are hurting, lost, broken. Maybe they don't feel any of those things. They don't feel lost. They don't feel broken. But we're trying to reach them in obedience to Christ's instruction to go and preach the good news to all creation. For me, mission starts with the proclamation of Jesus Christ, of who he is. The things that accompany mission, the proclamation of the gospel, the tools we use are really, really helpful, fantastic, and whatever works for you is great. But the whole point of mission is that the Father is looking for a way to reconcile a lost world to himself. The Father is looking for a way to put right what went wrong right at the beginning in the garden. And so the whole story of mission is the restoration of that which is broken, that which is rebelled, that which is fallen from the grace of God. It's the whole story of God through his mercy and through his love, finding a way of bringing us back together. In that context, we find that God hates unbalanced scales. God hates unjust measures. God hates when things are not, when people are not treated righteously or in a godly manner. In fact, God acts decisively against those who perpetrate injustice against peoples. It's offensive to heaven. So if anybody's going to take offense, the only person that is allowed to take offense is God. But this incredible, beautiful Savior, what does he do? He seeks to find ways to mitigate against the really terrible behaviors of humanity, in the way we treat one another, in the way we treat God, and he seeks to give us what we don't deserve. So justice in the course of mission is a really difficult thing. It's really important not to become political, I think. Our kingdom is not of this world. It's important, and I think the more we stick to the heart of Christ's commission, rather than the challenges politically around what does that mean in practice, the easier it'll be for us to walk in a broken world with a clear conscience. I think it's really important not to become political in the course of mission. Justice doesn't have a political color. Justice comes from God, and so for me, justice is intrinsic to mission. The whole point of the gospel message is God forgiving us of our sins, God applying mercy, if you like, in the face of what we do deserve, which is judgment. So yeah, they are linked, and I think that it also is linked not just with respect to doing mission, is linked with respect to how God sees the quality of what we're doing in terms of its impact upon our fellow human beings. So yeah, it is linked, but it's a very challenging subject. We're all trying our best to work out what the right thing is for us, and what's right for us in our context is not necessarily what's right for you and yours. We all have to work these things out ourselves. In as far as it helps you, for me personally, we made a decision as a church many years ago that we would always seek to be able to articulate why we're doing what we're doing, in what way does it serve Christ, in what way does it magnify Jesus, and in what way does what we're doing with respect to showing the love and mercy of God and the grace of God in a broken world, how do we reflect that and stay true to mission, which is proclaiming Christ? We run a school for excluded kids. We ran CAP for many years. We give food. We hand out food parcels. We're absolutely committed to serving and helping those who are hurting the most in our society. Why? Because the Bible is very clear that how we treat the widows and orphans really reveals the kind of people we are. When mission was commissioned, and when the early church was examining the quality of Paul's mission to the Gentiles, they accepted what he was doing, but they did impress upon him the importance of looking after widows and orphans and caring for the broken in society. So I do believe it's absolutely important. So we ask the question, how can we help? How can we make a difference? And so what we do is we take all the kids in the region, in our region, and we're in Reading, but we straddle 3 educational areas, and we take all the kids who are in danger of being permanently excluded, that the other organizations will not take, and we invest in them and we love them. So we run a school that's Ofsteded, and we have a 95% success rate of getting these kids into further education, into employment, or So it is important to be practical in that working. Now, the reason why we run a Christian school is because we want, as part of the educational establishment, by the way, is because we want to be able to bring Christ to them unashamedly. So we don't camouflage any of the things we do in terms of social action and hide it as and try and lever it to gain an opportunity to preach the gospel. No, we're upfront in all of our social action that we're doing this because of Jesus Christ. We're doing this because of his love for us, not because we are good, but because he's good. So we try to avoid doing social action that is just about trying to mimic the state, because we don't think that's what we're here for. We think we're here to help the poor, the broken, absolutely. But we think we're here to help them in a different way, in a way which helps them, which points to Christ, not the church, which points to Christ and his goodness for a broken humanity, of which we are all in some ways broken and need fixed. So we run a number of things, and recently we just secured £100,000 for the food charities. Our church, one of my assistant ministers, heavily involved in making that happen, for all the food charities in the town, We've managed, we think, to get them £100,000, which means they've doubled all their budget for this year, for the year coming in a time of lockdown. So we will do everything we can to serve and help, but we don't want to lose sight of the gospel in all of that. We don't want to be, we don't want to go native, as in forget this is about Jesus rather than the works we're doing. It's about him. It's always about him. And it's about his kindness and goodness to us in enabling us to reach out to those who are suffering in society. Yeah, I mean, my presidency has come at a very fascinating time. And I want to thank my colleagues again for inviting me to serve them in this way. I face a number of moral dilemmas with the whole issue of George Floyd dying. And my eyes are open to a number of issues I wasn't aware of as a Black person. With a mixed race heritage, although it might not be obvious to you, but I am actually mixed race. So, and so it threw up a whole number of issues, which, because I'm not politically motivated in what I do, I had to very quickly become aware of the political issues that were facing Black people, which I had not looked into myself, and come up to speed. And so the truth is that there are some people like myself who've got sharp elbows and they'll just get on with life, and it doesn't really matter what life throws at them. They will muddle through it all regardless. But there are many, many people who don't have sharp elbows, who are not wired up like that. And actually, it's unfair for them to have to justify their existence in a context which constantly marginalizes them and oppresses them. And I do say that very clearly, oppresses them. If you think about the fact that every police force in England and Wales, Black people are a multiple number of times more likely to be stopped and searched, whether they're driving their car or walking down the road, than any other racial group. Why? Simply because they're Black. Not because they're more criminal, because they don't find any a greater prevalence of criminality in stop and search than they do with the white population. So there's no difference in what they find on them. There's no statistically, in fact, they're more likely to find drugs on white people than Black people. So the George Floyd moment, I think, is an important moment for our Baptist church, because there are certain times in history where God highlights things, and he says this injustice, which is the treatment of Black people. I mean, in the Old Testament, if you saw your enemy's ox fall into a pit, you were obliged to get it out of the pit. You had a responsibility before God to treat that ox with dignity and fairness, even though it belonged to your enemy, never mind your fellow human beings. And so when we see that this systemic injustice in the police force, in the criminal justice system, where, again, when you get into the criminal justice system, you get to court, again, it's a multiple number of times, Black kids are more likely to be incarcerated immediately compared to the white counterparts for the same or a kind of offenses. And so for Black people, they face racism at every level, whether it's judiciary, whether it's police, whether it's in the workplace. The number of my colleagues in Reading who had no idea that the members of their churches were suffering these indignities they had no idea, no clue that Black people were suffering at all. And actually, that shows a pastoral lack of concern and a pastoral blindness, that you've got people in your church who are tithing, who are serving, and who are suffering because society treats them unfairly and unjustly. I watched a program the other day on BBC News, and one of the commanders, Commander Connor, she was asked a question: do you think that there is a problem with the way Black people are treated by in the stop and search? And she refused to answer it. And so you've got institutional denial as well as institutional racism. that exist in the police force. Actually, you know, and her response was, well, the majority of people support it. Well, the majority of Black people don't support it. In fact, you know, it's oppressive. It's the kind of thing that you would find. I mean, this sounds extreme, but please hear it in the way it's intended. You know, when Hitler was justifying the way he treated the Jews, he justified it by declaring that the Aryan race supported him in what he was doing. And you know, we just can't treat people unfairly and unjustly. And the sooner we as Baptists stand up and fight against that kind of injustice, the better. And so I think, you know, there are many things that cause injustice in society, many things that people are struggling with that are painful to them. But at this point in time, I believe that this is something being highlighted by God, and we as Baptists really should take notice of it. And not just take notice of it, we should do something in response to it. We should actively engage with it because God is highlighting it in society. Otherwise, it'll be another generation that God will use to deal with this issue of injustice in society. And I could go on, of course. I could go on. What did I do about it? Well, I did something that I found incredibly difficult. I had a huge moral dilemma. During lockdown, I organized a march in outside Parliament, a demonstration saying that Black lives do actually matter. Of course, you know, as a Black minister, I'm not really interested in the political wing of the Black Lives Matter movement, but I am interested in the godly affirmation that Black lives actually do matter. And so it was a huge dilemma. Do I go out and possibly spread more coronavirus? How just can that be? Or do I recognize that a greater evil and possibly, you know, result in people's lives being lost? Or do I acknowledge that for centuries, Black people and people of color's lives, their dreams have been oppressed, they've been killed, they've been shot, and it's been going on for hundreds of years? Which is the greater evil? How should I respond? And of course, it was a huge dilemma, but in the end, I felt that actually there was a window in which God was doing something prophetic, and we needed to stand up and be counted as ministers with our kids who were going out on the streets and protesting against the injustice of the way they've been treated simply because of the pigmentation of their skin. Yeah, I mean, the Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd, you know, this stuff has been going on for a long time. You can't look the other way if you want to, or you can face up to what's done with your tax money in your name to people who live in your midst and serve in our churches, our brothers and sisters. So that is, that's the George Floyd moment, I believe, has exposed the racism that exists in the workplace, in church, that exists with the police force, in education. I mean, you wouldn't have thought that there was racism in education, but let me tell you something. One of the reasons many of us Black leaders were upset about the way that grades were going to be assessed because of coronavirus is because, and these are government figures, not mine, government figures. The government found out that 60% of grades predicted for Black kids were under-predicted, and that's year on year. Okay, so in other words, teachers, and teachers are great people. The teachers are good people. Most of them are there because they care about the kids. But nevertheless, 60% of their predictions for Black kids are always under-predicted. I mean, so therefore, if you have a situation where you're going to rely on predicted grades, the Black kids are going to do worse. In every context that you face, whether it's a workplace, you know, Black people face prejudice and discrimination, and I think God is fed up with it, which is why he used. I don't think God caused George Floyd's death, but I think God took what was an evil moment and made everybody face it, and I think that's what God did. Nobody could run away from it. They couldn't go and get a latte down the road because they were in lockdown. They couldn't just forget it. It was on their screen constantly. people were faced with the injustice of their behavior, or of society's behavior, and particularly, specifically, the police force's behavior, which has resulted in a worldwide awakening of the injustices that exist in our midst. So, yeah, I found myself in a very difficult. I had to educate myself very quickly, and one of the things I would just appeal to all my white colleagues is, please don't ask Black people to educate you, about the problem. You can easily go and look for yourself at government figures and statistics. It's all there. You can educate yourself. I had to do it. And that would be my appeal. Please don't, because it put a huge strain on me personally, trying to learn myself and answer my colleagues who were asking me questions at the same time. I was just in the same boat as everybody else, trying to understand what on earth is going on. There are other people that have been trying for years to highlight these issues. I just thought I thought it was a God moment, and that God wanted me to highlight the problem. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I certainly think the racial injustice that exists, and if we look across our movement, I know the CLT, the leadership team, are doing their best to face into what they can do about the systemic lack of Black people in positions and offices across our movement. And this is, by the way, this can't be about tokenism, because if you just promote people who have not got the anointing or ability or gifting, it creates a bigger mess. But looking at how we can, I mean, how many Black people are up in the North, don't know, but are there opportunities, are there things that we can do to encourage those that exist? What should we be doing to encourage Black folk in our churches? Is there space for them in leadership? Can we train them up and equip them? These are the kind of questions I think that are being asked across the Baptist movement, and it's a healthy reflection that's going on. And I've got full confidence in the leadership team to get us there. So what I've been learning about justice in the face is that you can't ignore it. You can't ignore injustice. You can't turn a blind eye to it. You cannot. You can't defer it. You can't leave it to somebody else. You've got to do something about the injustice. At least in your context, you are responsible. You can't leave it to your Black colleagues. You can't say, well, Black colleagues, please come and help us and lead us in this, as if your Black colleagues are the only one who's got the Spirit of Christ in them. You also have the Spirit of Christ in you. This fight for justice, a number of things I've learned, it's not just a fight for Black people or people of color anymore. You've got grandparents who've got Black grandchildren. You've got husbands and wives who've got children who have married into other races, and it's suddenly their fight as well now. You've got university students. Another thing I've learned: why have we seen so many youngsters out on the streets? It used to be predominantly Black people marching. Now we're seeing a whole bunch of kids of different races all marching together. Why? Because they've gone to university together. You can't demonize somebody that your child or your friend or has spent 3 years at university with and knows them and has been their friend, and they've gone through difficult times together. The society is changing, and the stereotypes that some of the older generation hold against people of color are no longer held by the younger generation. They don't share this demonizing of people from different areas and different parts of the world. They don't accept them as the other that has to be feared. It's not within the psyche. So I've learned that. I've learned that the Baptist Church, if we as a Baptist movement want to see a change, we have to find our prophetic voice. We can't just go along, in my view, with all the other denominations. We've got to speak up about what we believe and what we affirm and what we want to see. As there's a place for unity. I believe that's absolutely true, but there's also a place for a Baptist distinct voice. And I believe we need to have the courage to have our own voice in all of these kind of issues. What have I learned? Well, I've learned that I've learned that there's an awful lot of racism out there that I didn't realize existed within the church. I had no idea. I've lost friends quite happily. I love that button on Facebook that says ban. I've banned a few people who've been unkind, not people who disagree with me, but people who've been unkind in their comments, unkind in the way they've spoken about others, who've been abusive. Just delete. Very happy to do that. No problem at all. So I've lost a handful of friends over this. But I think the issue of justice is much, much greater than any personal loss or any personal sacrifice. I think the issue of justice is at the core and the heart of who Christ is. And I think anybody who really is a follower of Jesus Christ will grapple with issues of injustice in an honorable way, and will do their best to bring the love and the alleviation of the suffering where and if they can. So yeah, so I've learned an awful lot of stuff. I've learned stuff about myself. I would add one or two other things that I think are important to express. I've learned that the most important thing is what happens to our children, not what's happened in our past. What we're fighting for is the future, not the past. The past has happened, but the future is yet to be determined. So if we want to make a change, we must marshal our resources to protect the next generation. I know there are debates about reparation and restoration and giving money because of past hurts and all that, but I don't personally believe that is the priority. I believe it is a priority for some, and that's fine. No, I believe the priority is stopping the injustice that exists in our society now, so that our kids. And I give one final example of it. My eldest son did law. He got a really good law degree. I think he got half a point over first class, so he was a bit annoyed. And but he got a good law degree, and he applied for jobs. He applied while he was just in his final year. Applied for something like over 40 jobs. Not one response. He changed his name. He took his middle name, Aaron, and he applied his middle name to the applications. And so I better change my name. Maybe that's what's stopping me. All 3 applications were accepted. All 3 applications offered him jobs. 40 with his full African name, not one response, not one interview. 3 with his Christian name, all 3. That's just my experience as one father. Think about what's happening in all of our churches and the challenges that our kids are facing. They're your kids too, because if you're a pastor, then you're a dad in the church. Or a mom in the church, if you're a pastor, you're a dad and a mom to all these people. So they're your kids too, and it's really important that you care about what they're suffering and what they're going through. So a lot of things I've learned, and yeah, it's been quite a challenging time. And in the middle of all that, I've tried to keep up. We've done some amazing stuff as a presidential theme of encouraging. I think we've got over 60 churches involved on a monthly basis doing coaching and training about how they can reach the lost, and so we've had all that going on as well. So which is why I got elected in the first place.